In this video, I want to compare screens between Steam Deck OLED, OLED screen, and Switch 2, which has IPS screen. We will start this test with somewhere around 65% of brightness on both screens. And the only way to see the true difference between these two screens is to switch off the lights completely. And as you can see on Cyberpunk beginning screen, they're not that far apart. OLED screen has a little bit of more contrast and punchy colors only because of technology, while on IPS panel on the Switch 2 colors a little bit flat and less punchy. I really like both screens to be honest, but right now we're using only somewhere around 65% of brightness. In Cyberpunk menu right now we can see completely different picture. OLED colors are more vibrant. Only because on OLED panel, because of technology, there is no backlight at all. Every single pixel can change brightness independently. And in some cases pixels on OLED screen can go completely off. While on IPS screen we have backlight panel right behind the screen. It is very hard to say which one is better. It's easier to ask which one you prefer more. For example, on OLED screen colors are a little bit more warm, when on IPS are more cooler. And also, as you can see, contrast is completely different. I mean, both panels are doing such a good job, but contrast on OLED is just unbeatable. For example, you can see in this scene on IPS panel, we can see much more than on OLED panel. Yes, OLED contrast is doing such a good job, but in the same time, it just took out some elements of the scene. For example, I cannot see what's happening in that corner. Or it is hard even to see that there is a track in front of us. Let's move forward and now we can see the track. On IPS panel we saw this track miles away, while on OLED we just seen it, to be honest. On OLED panel we have deeper black colors, which I prefer more, to be honest. But I cannot deny that on IPS screen we can see much more of the scene. This is still 65% brightness on both screens. We in the night city at night time, and I cannot see that much difference. Yes, I can see that OLED panel is darker again, but it's just a little bit different, and IPS panel is doing again very good job. But also I cannot deny that I really like punchy colors of OLED screen. Look at that red sign or red tower. IPS colors on the other hand are a little bit washed out. And now let's go to 100% brightness on both screens. And again, both screens are doing very good job. Colors on OLED screen are a little bit more punchy, which I prefer more. But I'm also surprised how good IPS panel on Switch 2. This is very good panel. This is probably the best IPS panel I have ever seen. And you can clearly see why I'm saying this. Because there is almost no difference between OLED and IPS. The only difference are the punchy colors and a little bit more contrasty. Like in this scene, you can clearly see that Tent and the guy next to Tent, they're more vibrant on Steam Deck OLED. And also colors are a little bit more warm on Steam Deck OLED, and this is what I prefer, to be honest, more. It looks a little bit chill on Steam Deck OLED, while on Switch 2 it looks kinda a little bit flat. But in the same time on IPS screen on Switch 2 we can see a little bit more around these guys. If we will just look to another direction, you can see that image is very similar. Even that shadow, I'm not sure which one I like more, to be honest. Switch 2 IPS or Steam Deck OLED. They both look very good. I really like how I can see more in this area on IPS screen, while on OLED screen everything is just a little bit more dark. But in the same time they look very similar in my opinion. And while we're looking now at new direction, it is very hard to tell. I like colors on OLED screen, but they look again very similar. These two signs are so bright because my camera just cannot keep up with brightness. But as you can see, image is not that different at all. On OLED screen again, more colors, a little bit more contrasty, but they all look very similar. And again, it is very different, but in the same time, kinda similar image. IPS screen on Switch 2 is definitely less colorful, more flat, while OLED panel on Steam Deck OLED is more colorful and punchy. And it is very hard to tell which I prefer more in this scene. I would go for Steam Deck OLED again. I like these vibrant colors. But Switch 2 still doing very good job. And now we're looking at very dark area in the night city, and again OLED screen is doing a little bit better job with contrast, but they look very similar. In this scene, to be honest, I prefer both screens equally. I wonder which one you prefer in this scene. I'm very confused. Write me in the comments below. Thank you. And now we have seen with Club 9 lights, and they both look very similar. OLED's colors are a little bit more punchy again, and a little bit more contrasty, but IPS screen on Switch 2 is doing very good job again. It is very hard to tell which one I prefer more. I would say Steam Deck OLED. I like a little bit more punchy colors again. Here is another Night City dark scene. Is it me or they look just exactly the same? The only difference is the icons. They're way more brighter on Steam Deck OLED. Right on the side you can see the orange one, but that's it. Everything else is exactly the same. Exactly the same scene, but during the day, and on IPS screen on Switch 2 is a little bit more flat. OLED is again a little bit more punchy, and it is very bright on both because we're using 100% of brightness. Let's reduce brightness on both devices to 50%. When you're not pushing colors on IPS screen on Switch 2, it looks quite incredible, to be honest. It even looks very similar to Steam Deck OLED. You can see it yourself. There's not much difference. Maybe a little bit more punchy colors again on OLED. That's just technology. And again, a little bit more of contrast. It is a little bit darker, just a little bit. Here I'm very curious to see if there is any ghosting on Switch 2 IPS panel compared to OLED, of course, where there is no ghosting at all. I heard a lot about people complaining that there is like too much of ghosting on Switch 2. Digital Foundry completely destroyed the screen, that they said it's not a great screen at all. And let's find out together if it's true. I just slowed down this footage 4 times and you can clearly see that OLED is doing way better job, more stable image. You can clearly see things, while on IPS panel a little bit more blurry. Motion blur right now in the game is completely switched off. This is just panel blurring the image. Yes, it is very different, but there is no complete mess on IPS screen on Switch 2. So in my opinion, Switch 2 is doing very good job. You're probably not gonna notice that motion blur at all. And this is 4 times slowdown footage of me driving car just forward. That was not easy to do. Luckily we have on Switch detachable controller. Let's see which one will do better job. And I can clearly see that there are more motion blur on IPS panel on Switch 2. And on OLED panel everything is almost perfectly stable. And I'm just shocked how good IPS screen on Switch 2. This is one of the best IPS screens I have ever seen, to be honest. Check this out. Image is still quite stable. To be honest, on ROG Ally X, image would fall apart, only because they are not using the best IPS panel on their handhelds. Yes, I can clearly see that it's a little bit more blurry on IPS panel, but this is just the way it is. Different technology, OLED it will be always more stable. I'm not so sure what Digital Foundry was speaking about. I really like both screens. I think they are very good screens. And I wonder, what do you think about IPS screen on Switch 2? Write me in the comments below. Subscribe, like, and I will see you in next one. Bye.